One second. Anybody have a short reflection?
Yeah, I have a short one. It may not be news to this group, but it's actually my wife was pointing out, we have a ginkgo tree on our property. And I didn't know anything about them, but that they're incredible. Living fossils. They can live to be thousands of years old, I've heard. They're extremely robust in that they're drought resistant. They can be in all sorts of different soil environments, and yeah, just an amazing tree.
They are the preferred street tree in New York City.
Is that right?
One of you see them all over long expressways.
Except they're all male.
I was gonna say they're all male,
Right.
yes.
Right? Because they have separate male and female trees, and the female cones
Stink.
stink when they start to rot.
That's what we have.
Do you? You saw them occasionally.
Well, how do they propagate? Do they?
Well, they're probably
they're-
asexually for horticultural purposes. They're taking cuttings.
So you're not gonna have any.
But there is a park up in the International District that has a row of females on it, and they're the Asians eat those cones. And so they're harvested, you go up there in the right time in the fall when they're mature, and there are people up picking them up. And I know that because we use them to teach with at the university, and we have to go there to get them. And we have to compete with them to get some of the females to have for class. There used to be one on campus, and they removed it in part because they stink.
My wife does one side, she had a little small.
They do drop something, because they put one on sidewalks in New York too.
That's right, probably they do the male.
Fall off on the sidewalk.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
They're basically
You find
okay.
occasionally females planted. Probably because they were ones that were propagated from seed and they didn't know until they were mature whether they would be male or female.
And I guess they're not a bad, even the females aren't a bad tree, as long as they are next to a sidewalk. The sidewalk specifically is a bad place for ginkgo fruits.
Ours
It's like
is
having-
kind of off to the
But,
side. Ours is kind of off to the side, so it's not really.
yeah, as long as it's not raining, dropping on the sidewalk, I guess it's okay.
So one of the other interesting historical phenomena about ginkgo is that they are not known in the wild. They were only at the time of European contact with China, they were only known from shrines and cultural sites in China. And were extinct in the wild.
So basically man preserved,
Is that the same thing as dawn red? Is it same?
No, dawn
Oh,
red was
no, it's not the same thing.
Dawn
as dawn
red
red,
has a natural
but-
population, but it's very small. And now planted widely.
That seems contrary to the idea that they're so ancient.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, lots of ancient things are no longer, right, have gone extinct.
Right.
And there are 5 lineages of seed plants, which are the main group of plants that used to dominate the earth. There's the flowering plants, there's conifers, there are things we call cycads, and there are things called netales, which includes Mormon tea, ephedra, and then there's ginkgo. And that whole lineage of seed plants consists of one species that's alive today. They're extensive in the fossil record, and there are other species recognized in the fossil record, but just one survives today, and it was only known from cultivation. It is only known from cultivation. It's widely planted now, but
There you go.
Thank you for that, Richard.
it's a very interesting species.
Is that the same?
I have one in a pot. I have it in a big pot. And I keep it pruned to about 8 feet high, and they're hardy here, so we can grow them. I've seen them in China grown in big stone basins that are 1,000 years old.
In the fall, the leaves turn a wonderful golden.
Yeah.
Yes, they're very pretty. Is that true of Frank lineage too now, that it's only known in the wild,
Yes.
only known in captivity?
Yeah,
Can we move on? That was very interesting. Yeah. Let's see, we're gonna introduce ourselves. We have a couple of people who are not usually here, so we will introduce ourselves. Councilmember Golden, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Councilmember Goldman. I'm the liaison to the tree board. Also, I just wanted to check on my screen. Am I blurry to you? It seems like I'm blurry looking at myself.
Very slightly.
Have you had much to? Okay.
Yes, I gave my laptop some beer. Sorry.
Okay, there's a, yeah, you look very.
We recognize you though, and your voice sounds familiar, so that's good. Elizabeth, go ahead.
My name's Elizabeth, I'm the assistant planner in the city. And I handle the administrative side.
And Dick Olmsted, tree board member.
Jim Mead. President.
And I think you have some comments in a minute, right?
Yeah.
And I'm Mark Phillips, current chair of the tree board.
Richard Saunders, tree board member.
George Bruegel, tree board member.
BJ Hedel, citizen. Victoria Kutaz, vice chair.
Now, I just happen
We
to
do have one
know,
other person online, just FYI.
is Julian here? He is. Julian, you want to introduce yourself? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, this is Julian Anderson. Mark will explain why I'm here.
Okay. You know, I will in a minute too. Thank you.
All right.
So we have a great opportunity today. I think we will just extend our introductions a little bit. And with BJ here, I was hoping, because I know that you were interested in possibly joining the tree board.
Correct.
The tree board. So I thought maybe we could take just a minute or so for you to say a little bit more about yourself.
Oh,
And your
okay.
interest in the tree board, or you're interested in trees, or anything if we want to share.
Maybe we can say more about ourselves too. For the same reason.
I don't know what to say. I'm just wanting to be involved in the community of Lake Forest Park. I just moved here.
You did.
Yeah, well, I actually grew up here and I've always lived in Puget Sound, but I just thought that I was going to volunteer events and doing different activities with nonprofits and thought, oh, well, there's the tree board. That would be kind of fun to do in the wintertime instead of being out in the rain. But other than that, I just I don't know, you want to hear my history of volunteering or what else do you want to hear about?
Maybe in maybe the 60-second version, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna read off of my volunteer work off of my resume. Carbon coach with the Sustainable Community Steward. I am also a Green Seattle Steward with Cascade Land Conservancy and Seattle Green Partnership. Different places that I have volunteered are Cascade Harvest Coalition, Seattle Tilth, which is now Tilth Alliance, People for Puget Sound, Audubon, Washington Water Trails Association, Cascade Bicycle Club, Washington Native Plant Society, Bats Northwest. And I do mostly outdoor activities. Sometimes I do office work for them. I'm also a volunteer with Community Fruit Tree Harvest, which is now, I don't know what you would call it, city fruit, but that's not really evergreens. I just do a lot of volunteer work over the last couple decades where I go and pull non-natives and plant natives and spread mulch. And I thought, well, you know, now that I'm freshly retired at 65, I should start doing indoor work. Something
Our
like
work
that.
is indoors. Occasionally we have to get out too.
Have you done through the Native Plant Stewards program with the Native Plant
Yes.
Society?
Many years ago.
So I probably led one of the sessions. so-
Oh, okay. Well, it was quite a few years ago. Yeah.
What
I've done that.
are you retired from?
Well, I did about over 2 decades with King County Metro driving a bus, but before that I drove, and after that I drove, and before that even I was in restaurant business. You know, my first couple jobs was in restaurant until I started driving a bus. And afterwards, I also, in the last 5 years, haven't worked at all because I was in a motorcycle accident, which cracked my hip and affected my memory ever so slightly. I'm still trying to work out exactly how much memory is there and or whether I can keep things as I learn them. It's very minimal, obviously, because I'm here. I remembered to come here. But other than that, I was just freshly retired and thought I would try to do some more paperwork sort of stuff.
Well, there are several of us on board who are in our 70s who know all about little bits of memory going missing.
Yeah.
I certainly do, and I suspect everybody else does.
Yep.
So I met BJ on Saturday at the Green Fair, Victoria and I
Okay.
did.
Yep,
And,
right.
and here, she was doing a lot of volunteering. A wide range of volunteering. you
Yeah.
do. Greeting people at the door, you help Sarah and me get all our stuff out to the car.
Yeah.
That was
I
good.
do a lot of the events where it's just one day for environmental nonprofit. The stuff I listed off, my resume is about 10 years short. So I just pick a nonprofit who's gonna have a annual event fundraiser, and I immediately email them and say, you need volunteers? You know, I have a truck with a canopy. Sometimes I use that for nonprofits, environmental nonprofits, and just do what I can.
Great, that's great. Very
Yeah.
good, very good. Well,
Did mention Graceville. Been coming to Graceville for years.
Grace Cole and also 5 Acre Park.
Yeah, I've seen that fire.
oh, maybe that's where I've seen it, but you did look familiar. with me.
Yeah, 5 Acre Park was fun because I used to ride by horseback in the 70s. I knew that we had to cross the street and go along outside and then cross back over, go, because we knew that shack had a little witch wrote that lived there, you know.
Right.
And I had a horse in my backyard and I was in 4-H, and it was just like, you have to go really far away from that property when you go by.
Well, you know, we've had, over the last time I've been with the board, last, so 3 or 4 years anyway, we've had 1 or sometimes 2 vacancies on a tree board.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we would certainly like to fill that position. I think Elizabeth may have shared a link with you in terms of there is a short application form. That you will deliver to the front desk down here. Addressed to, well, whoever just indicate on it what it is, it's an
Okay,
application for tree board, you'll see that it gets the right place.
can I ask what you guys do?
You can always ask.
Sure, we do have a number of things we want to be sure to get to tonight, so maybe we can be reasonably brief if we
Okay.
can.
I'm a retired university professor in botany.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, what does the
Yeah.
committee do?
Oh, the
Oh,
committee
the
does.
committee, we have a.
Well, we are chartered by the city to do 3 things. One is advise the city council and mayor on tree related issues, particularly the ordinance. Do public outreach and education around trees and.
Okay.
Are those 2 separate things? Outreach, education, and then.
Public
advice?
outreach and education and events.
Oh, and then events, that's it.
That's the third.
So we do an Arbor Day event every year.
Okay.
And the city does have a budget for planting trees, and we are able to use that to do tree planting events.
Hmm.
I don't think we've done as much of that as we should in recent years, and there've been some questions about how much money we actually have accessible for that, but
Yeah, right.
that's one of the things that I'd like to see we do for them going forward.
It is possible, I'm thinking not likely these days, that we'll get a significant chunk of money from Sound Transit. When they have to take down some trees and have to pay to replace them,
Hmm.
but possible some of that money will go into the tree fund.
Hmm.
I think the most recent indications are, well,
Well, I'm really.
which is fine.
I drive through Lake Forest Park and fairly recently, I've been driving a lot of the back roads, and I'm astonished that there are so many trees, evergreens covered in ivy next to houses. And I'm like, do you guys cover that? Do you approach a homeowner and say, you know, the ivy over there on that tree, as soon as it kills that tree, it may or may not fall on your house. Why don't we get rid of the ivy?
We do educational events and we
Okay.
need to do more of them. So you can
Okay.
write it home there. It sounds like you have a lot of ideas for that. That'd be
Okay.
great.
A lot of the things that we do as a board are the result of individual members having an interest in something.
Hmm.
So Victoria's been really great about doing outreach related things.
Hmm.
You know, I have a background in botany, so I've done more sort
Okay.
of botany technical things, and Doug has a background in forestry, and he's been really on the stuff about the tree inventory and
Hmm.
canopy and stuff like that, and so, you know, it's. Julia Bent, who was a former board member, was really into invasive species removal, and she got funds to do a big invasive species removal along Magnolia Creek that you may or may not have seen signs up along that.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago. It was just,
Stacy Spain, who's not here, is also interested in ivy. He was one of the winners of the Ivy Out contest.
that's right, you had an Ivy Out Walk contest that we sponsored a few years ago.
Hmm.
That's how she ended up being on tree boards.
Wow.
Participated in that.
Well, he has seen me wading through the underbrush just to cut ivy at the base, so. I I don't know, it seems like I should go door to door and say, if you don't do it, I will.
So if you join the board, I'd say that, you know, you will soon see what sort of things we do and you'll see where your interests can fit in and
Okay,
you know, you can step forward and take leadership on things.
I don't want to take up any more meeting time.
We have some handouts to say what we do too, there's pamphlets here and there.
Okay.
And there is some information on the city's website too.
Yeah.
a little bit, and you can feel free to ask any of us questions.
Actually, if you look at
online or
the,
whatever.
if you can, I'm sure our last annual report is on the website, isn't it?
Mhm.
If you look at the last annual report, that summarizes pretty well what we do, what we have done anyway.
All right, well, thank you. Appreciate that and appreciate your interest.
You want to
Okay.
finish while you're on the table?
Nope, not really.
Okay,
Go on. We all.
I just think we do have some things I want to be sure to get to, and that would probably be another 15 minutes, and we'd be wondering, when are we gonna get out of here? And,
Okay.
so, we do want to look at the agenda, if everybody had a chance to look at it, the agenda for the meeting tonight, is there, any comments or thoughts on that, or? Is there a motion to approve that agenda?
A motion that we approve the agenda as written.
Did
there a
we
second?
have,
Oh,
did you say earlier that there was something we should put in this section that we were approving it with an addition?
no, it was just this handout, I was hoping I could add this to the packet. But it's
Okay.
already on the agenda, exceptional tree, this is already on the agenda, this is just sort of support material for that, but it's. That's not necessary.
So it'll come up in the course of our conversation, so, did I hear a second? Second, yes, thank you. All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Then we have minutes from our last meeting in March. I thought, pretty good minutes, as a matter of fact. And I didn't have any thoughts or corrections or modifications. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to clarify?
I had one thing that I think was maybe a misspelling or a miswording under tree board update. It says obnoxious weed, and I think we were talking about not.
It's really not
Oh, fun, I like it.
Maybe we meant both.
this. I mean,
That's
it is,
line
but that's not
30.
official.
One is,
37.
one is an official term, the other is colloquial.
Is it opinion?
You want to suggest a change to that, Richard? Is that-
I suggest on line 37 that we change obnoxious to noxious.
I do not second it.
Okay. Well, we'll have.
That's all.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Let's see. We have two people here who I believe are interested in public comments, so. Julian, you want to go ahead? Are you interested in making a public comment?
No, I'm here because we had that brief conversation about a town in Quebec.
Sounds like a public comment to me.
That was it.
Oh,
Oh, you want, well, I can elaborate. I came across an article of a small town in our league who's concerned about not having enough trees in their town. And they're concerned because they suffer from a heat island effect. And so they wanted to, more than encourage everybody to have a tree in their yard, they were going to impose a fee for any landowner who has no trees on their land. And that's kind of a disincentive, money proposed method for getting trees everywhere. But it shows the seriousness they have about actually having trees on every lot. And I think there are some areas of this city which would benefit from more trees than they have. And
yeah,
I've
thank
sent to
you.
Mark the link to that article.
Yes, and I read it, and in fact, I brought it tonight for a short reflection, if nobody had anything else, but we got off on ginkgo trees, so that was good. The article also said it was a new community. It sounded like everything had been, it was a rapidly developed suburban community. And apparently all the trees were either didn't have trees to begin with, or they were all removed in the process.
What was the name of this?
The name of the city, San Amable.
Say that again?
San Amable,
This is in Quebec, you said?
Quebec. Yeah. Well, Julian, thank you for that. If people are interested, I would be happy to forward that link on to tree board members.
Yeah.
So we have Jim Mead here again tonight. And would you like to comment?
So I was kind of tasked to check in with KCD King Conservation District. I went up and hiked the 5-acre park and saw some of the black locusts. They're off to the south there, right at that. As I figured, that's a lot of gnarly trees there, a lot of older than Grace Pole. But as I talk, my contact Mike, is no longer there, so I talked to Ashley, but she's a streamside specialist. And the forestry specialist, Ellen Amstein, won't be back until Monday, but she thought that certainly you can inject black locusts fairly easily, and even in King County, she said, I didn't think that there's a requirement for a licensed person to do that, but you have to have special tools to do that. But anyway, so I was gonna, but she did say that probably need to get some of the city to get some kind of a contract with if you're gonna decide to do that. So the other thing, I was walking through the park there, you know, and you sell the tags, and my neighbor was on the arborist a few years back, and he, in his old property right next to me, he had a lot of tags on his trees. But in they're just numbers. Who has the key to that? The numbers on the trees and what they are.
Somebody must.
Or either City Hall or the Stewardship Foundation, whoever. I would guess somebody from the Stewardship Foundation, maybe Doug Enick might have had a hand in that process.
Whoever didn't understand that you need to leave slack in the nail when you nail something.
Yeah,
They
some of
nail
them
them right tight to the bark, and as trees grow, they just pop those right off.
Well,
Yeah, Mike had on his, he just had but he had those dangling tags.
Yes, if you leave a, half an inch or 3/4 of an inch of the nail, then it will give, 10 or 15 years of growth.
Yeah, it looks like those have been on there a while, so anyway, so.
Well, that's a good question, though.
I'll check.
Where's the inventory data on those trees?
Yeah, I assumed this, somebody in the city had that, but maybe not.
I would think so.
Because Lake Forest Park, there's movement, or the stewardship is moving to create signage on a lot of the plants in there with a little bar. QR code, thank you, to explain, what the plant is, native usages, things like that, so that they're working on doing that, but it would be interesting to me to figure out, because I'm not really that good at all in what kind of trees, because there's some interesting trees in. Anyway, so I don't know if this group was interested in injecting those black locusts. Doing, but I have contact information.
I would imagine that's must be when they're shoots, when they're small. Injecting, it happened to a mature.
I think you can do it to mature ones, that
But I don't.
they're gonna have to be taken down at some point.
Yeah, she said you'd have to take the bark off.
Yeah, but I mean, they're gonna take the trees down too, right?
Well, yeah, they die and then.
Yeah, then we had them, so.
But
I
do
was
they
thinking
sprout?
cutting them down and then using one of those herbicides that you paint on the stumps would probably be the way to go, but.
Yeah, that's glyphosate, right?
Oh, there's other things that you can use, yeah,
Do they sprout from the roots, Dick?
yes.
Okay, so you're
Voracious there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why
I don't know if injecting is more or less effective. That's something Drew would probably know, but I'm not sure if injecting is more or less effective than.
It works on the holly.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. So
but other things do too. It's a question of what's the most effective way to do it.
And these are big enough that they would be hazardous if they are left standing when they're dead and.
Yeah.
So they're gonna have to come down, so how you can inject them, let them die,
Have you had a chance to talk to others at the Stewardship Foundation about that idea?
No, actually not, our board meeting's coming up here next Tuesday.
Well, I certainly know, as you do, that there are folks who have strong feelings at the Stewardship Foundation about the use of herbicides, and we want to.
They used them on the Gray Skull. You know, so what, that was, Mike and KCD, and so they were
Right.
cool with that, and there's some things you just can't get rid of unless you do, or such as
Yeah.
Northwest bamboo and.
Okay.
Can I read from the internet?
Sure.
Girdling. For larger sprouts, you can girdle the tree by removing a ring of bark in cambium and then apply herbicide to the girdled area.
Yeah.
Instead of taking down the whole tree, I don't know.
The point I was making though, these are trees that are big enough that once they die. They have to be removed, because if you just leave them in a park and they
Okay.
fall on their own, there'd be a hazard that I'm sure the city would not. Want to have.
And that's a worthwhile point, because things get delayed in the city.
Yeah.
In any government, and if we say, oh, we'll go ahead and go inject them now, and then we'll, have somebody come in next month to cut them down. And the contract gets delayed, or this or that, or suddenly it's next year, then you've got the situation you're talking about.
Would rather take them down before they're dangerous than
Yeah.
wait for them to be dangerous and
Yeah,
hope we can
right.
get them
And-
down
and-
quickly.
Which is why I was thinking that if there was a way they could be
Yeah.
cut and then
And then
the
painted.
stumps poisoned. So that the roots don't resprout, that would be the
Like,
ideal.
that was actually why I read that. There's 5 here, and I just read that one thinking that it would be helpful to get rid of the tree, get it to die, and I wasn't thinking about whether it would fall. It was a
Yeah.
matter of it resprouting, and that would keep it from resprouting
Yeah.
until you could get the tree down.
We have those, we have a grove of them in our front yard. We gradually removed them over the years because they lean over the house and stuff. But we found them trying to get up inside the lower part of the house in the back.
Yeah.
Which was never fully finished. It's kind of got a brick area. Those things were coming up between the bricks. The other side of the house.
System.
So, but anyway, I mean, the question in my mind about this is, it really is begging for some kind of a plan
Tom,
that has everybody who cares about it involved, including
Well, I've
the
been trying to
property
get
owners.
together with John Brew and Polly and the person, the Parks Board that I met with. To come up with a plan. Do I be involved with that?
That'd be good. That'd be good.
Send me your email address, so I can write it down on here. and I'll just add it to
Oh.
my list.
at Gray Skull, the beavers are doing what we were talking about. They have a cottonwood that size, this diameter of this table, that he's about halfway through. And so what is your opinion? I'm debating about, since the tree's dead, but wrapping a fence around it to keep them from actually toppling. Because right, I'm at least on one side, because it would go across the pond, which would endanger the boardwalk, any houses or anything like that. But it's a huge tree, and we're fencing them as fast as we can in there. And they're one step ahead of us all the time, so this one is the question of
When that comes down, are the branches the kind of thing they're looking for food?
I'm thinking it's gonna be ponds down here. I don't know if they're gonna be able to get to it, but anyway, they might, if it comes off the stump.
If it's still alive, they would use it. for food.
You said it's dead.
Well, it's girdled.
It's going to be dead, but it's still
Yeah,
alive.
yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
If it's not gonna hit the trail or anyone, I'd say let them take it down.
Yeah.
Cause it's the same thing, if you fence it and they don't take it down and it dies, then at some point it's gonna come down.
Or branches are gonna come down
Yeah.
individually.
It'll be on the west side, all the juicy branches. So Beavers Northwest is coming out tomorrow, I'm meeting them up in the park, and they're gonna put in notch fences.
Oh, yeah.
They couldn't get pond level permits, so. It'll be a forever task of keeping that clean, but.
Yeah, that goes, yeah.
I know the water keeps rising. We can't get into girdle the trees because the water keeps rising. Kind of a paradox.
It's really high, especially with these rains.
You must have some interesting conversations among your fellow tree stewardship foundation people about that. So what is the natural course
I
there?
wanted that 2,000, please put a fence around it for me. Yeah, definitely. And I've had one tree that's fallen and was caused by a beaver, it snapped the boardwalk in half. Lucky my background, I can fix stuff like that, but yeah.
But it fell in a really short section.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Take out the whole thing.
Okay, you ready to move on, Jim? Anything else you want to say?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that. It's good to keep up to date with what's going on there. Next on our agenda is reports and announcements from three board members or from Councilmember Goldman or Elizabeth. Anybody that would like to? Is there any announcements we need to know about?
I did talk to Mark about the banner. And he said, give me a receipt, the city can reimburse. Right, for the table of cost.
Sounds good.
Okay, good to know. Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thanks. I can give an update on some citywide projects that are tree related. The first, the Lakefront Park, we're probably going to have to build the park in stages just because we don't have all the funding at the moment. The state budget, the Senate budget includes an additional $1 million for park construction. The House budget does not, so that's going to have to be reconciled by the end of the month. There was an earmark in the congressional budget, but that was taken out with the continuing resolution, so we're not getting any federal money for the park. Second project, the roundabout. I believe the city is looking to go out and get bids for the roundabout project. This is Ballinger and 40th, kind of where you have to turn left to stay on 104. That project, putting in the roundabout, will take out some trees, and since it's in the right of way code would say that, well, we would try to replant trees in the area near the right of way. If not, then they would go by in some of the tree deficient areas that the tree board highlighted in that map. And then an update regarding Sound Transit and the BRT project. From what I've heard, it is unlikely Sound Transit's going to be applying for any permits until at least 2026. They're looking to start their construction in Kenmore and Bothell later this year, but LFP won't see that until early 26, most likely. So any questions about that?
Questions,
ahead,
even though
BJ.
I'm, there's sort of a comical comment about the roundabout. That I've heard people say that after the roundabout is when you're gonna have a smooth Ballinger Way and repave the whole, and the reason you're not repaving it now is you're waiting for the roundabout to be finished. Is that true?
So to clarify, the city doesn't repave. It's WashDOT because it's a state highway. Yeah. And yes, from what I've heard, and also because their budget is highly limited, they're not looking to do repair work on Ballinger until, like, they want to try to synchronize it with when the roundabout is being constructed. That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? And that information from Larry. Thank you, Larry.
Got and reports and announcements, updates from the CPAT team. Things are moving
Say what
forward.
that is, Victoria, so we all understand what CPAC.
Sure, the Climate Policy Advisory Team. Stacy and I sit on that along with folks from the Planning Commission and the Climate Action Committee. Working with city staff on adding a climate element to our comprehensive plan. If you haven't taken the survey that everyone should have gotten a postcard about, please do it. Remind your neighbors, remind your friends. I'm trying to get as much community input as possible on what's most important to folks about planning for our climate future and resiliency in Lake Forest Park. And planning for potential impacts that are coming our way. Last meeting, we had presentations on the greenhouse gas inventory study that they've done. by far our biggest contributor is transportation. The biggest piece of that is our allotted portion of CTAC traffic. So there are large chunks of the greenhouse gas inventory that we can't directly impact with local policy. But they also did a travel market summary that summarized trips within Lake Forest Park, vehicle trips within Lake Forest Park. And how many of them are within the city and how many of them either start or end in the city and end up or go outside. Significant amount of our traffic is leaving Lake Forest Park or started outside Lake Forest Park and ending up here. So things we're talking about in that you'll see, I think, in the survey as options to select around ways to mitigate that, minimize traffic and the impact of vehicle travel. Things like having transportation hubs, talking about bus lines, talking about how we can have more hubs throughout the city that people are accessing so that you're not driving from the far side of the city into the town center for basic things. How can we have more micro hubs around town, things like that. The team is going to be doing some focus groups. I don't know if they have started that yet. I get updates from them, I think next week is our meeting. So they're going to be reaching out to a handful of groups if they haven't already, I believe including folks like Stewardship Foundation. One of the, I think Richard, you gave me the contact information for one of the high school clubs, Shorecrest. So I believe they're reaching out there. I don't know if they've gotten anything coordinated. So doing more community outreach in addition to the survey. Without that. Any questions?
Does this survey apply to landowners, homeowners only?
If any residents, right?
I believe it's, yeah.
Okay, because I rent a room in a house and there's 5 people and we have never seen anything in the mail come having to do with this survey.
Well, it came about a month ago.
And it
Okay.
probably is the sort of thing that might have just ended up in the trash
Okay.
as junk mail, because it's just a little card with
Okay.
colored font and stuff, and it's the sort of thing that
Okay,
would be easily overseen.
but I can
Yeah.
see why only homeowners would get this survey and I'm just like.
It went out
golly,
to every resident
Anybody with a mailing address.
and, you know,
Okay,
So you should be able to get access to it though off of the website.
Really?
yeah, I'll double
Sure.
check that it's on the city website and let you know where it is.
great, thank you.
Thank you. Victoria,
Any
thank
other
you for that
questions?
information. And I think at some point, I expect the tree board will have some opportunity to make input into the policy work that your group is doing.
I don't know what the plan is for if they have a specific. I think that's Stacy and I's job is to tell you what we're up to and get any questions or input along the way. We aren't at the point yet that we have any actual like drafts to review or anything. So that'll be coming over the next couple months. I think we start on drafting, I think
There's
this month.
certainly will be a public process that
Yes.
can participate in.
Yes.
as individuals. Yeah.
And the CPAC team is working on the draft by June, and then June through December is going to be final review, and I believe that'll be when there will be, I think, additional community input of the actual drafted piece by then. So right now they're trying to get community input on how to get information through the survey and stuff so we can inform the drafting process, and then input on the draft will happen after June, I believe.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else by way of reports or announcements? Let's move on to talk about the Green Fair, which was last Saturday, which at least 3 of us here, Victoria, Dick and I were able to attend. We had a table at the Green Fair and Drew Arborist was with us for a good deal of that time. I thought the table looked pretty good and thank Victoria for the work that she did in terms of the making it presentable and making it interesting for people.
I thought it was great, those little
Yeah.
cutouts that she made that look like
Yeah.
Profiles and.
You get your brown cardboard thing, I gotta get.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Just so that is on the record now, I have to tell you at the end, if you just go to cityoflfp.gov, Right, the top of the news and events is help shape Lake Forest Park's climate future, and you can take the survey right there.
Oh, okay.
All the
I
information.
will remember that.
Just the city website, right on the front page of the city
Okay.
website, there's a survey link,
Okay.
and it is open through April 10th. Sorry about that, back to the Green Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it went great. We have the new banner that can hang on the table or can hang in a booth that just says Lake Forest Park Tree Board and has the city logo. We have some new stickers that I got printed. There's Lake Forest Park sticker that were very popular. People came over, and it's always easy to get people to come talk to you when you're giving things away.
I thought it was just kids who liked stickers, but there weren't many kids there actually, were there?
No, not at
No.
all.
Stickers have become a thing for adults.
So between water bottles and laptops,
Yeah,
there you go.
they're quite popular.
Okay, well,
all the professional mechanical society organizations I go to give out stickers now, so.
Well, I've seen them all over bumpers and backsides of vehicles everywhere.
I had all the kids up the park going there. You're being 50.
Did you want to talk about the survey we have on the poster board?
I forgot to read it. Forgot to read it. Well, yeah, talk about it. We did a survey. The survey was, I forget what the word is. Oh, you know, I took a picture of it. It was another way to try and engage people. You know, what didn't work too well was, 2 truths and a lie.
I think we gave something out that asked us to do
That's
it.
because we didn't push it. We didn't
Yeah.
reach out and say, here, come on, let's take a little test for me.
There was a lot going on.
Yeah, but it's good to have more stuff than you need.
Yeah.
So let's see, this. We just had a flip chart, right, where we wrote on it, LFP's tree regulation should be amended to encourage the retention of more very large trees. On the one hand was disagree, and on the far side was agree, and put a sticker somewhere on that spectrum where you fall on that. Was one who very definitely disagreed with that idea. And everything else was on the agree side. There were about, I think I counted them, there were 25 respondents. I think 25 people who put a sticker somewhere on there. Now, it's probably kind of a special audience. you might predict that kind
What
of an
you call a
outcome.
push pull. I think, in the-
Yeah. But it gave us a way to talk about that topic.
Yeah,
And as a matter of fact, I had a serious conversation with David Hepp and Lauren Hepp, who were there. They, in February, had a large tree fall on their home. Anyway, they were taking me to task in terms of pushing the idea of large trees. And I know that, David is one of the authors of the community forest management plan that we have. And I worked with him, and I know that he's very much, likes the forested nature of Lake Forest Park. So it kind of got my attention to talk with him about that. He was suddenly very concerned about the possibility of that. I think what he was actually saying was something like this, was that he thought it was not a great idea to be encouraging large trees unless we were also doing things that would help educate people about the potential hazards, the things that they should look for, how they make sure that large trees on their property are as healthy as they can be.
It's like removing ivy.
That kind of thing. Yeah, and not people who were against trees by any means, but there was certainly a note of caveat in the conversation in terms of how we should. And it gave me some thoughts, and I think that does make sense. As we talk about exceptional trees in a few minutes, there may be some sidelines to that we want to kind of be taking into account.
And I had conversations with a couple other people along the same lines of folks who didn't put a sticker on the poster board, but it started a conversation around folks who are nervous about large trees, nervous about trees coming down, concerned about the health of trees on their property. And did have one person who was asking about if there's any resources or things like city funding to help folks with fixed incomes to maintain their trees.
Mhm.
And to make sure that take down sick or dying trees and make sure that the trees they have are staying healthy so that it doesn't cause $100,000 in property damage when it comes down on your house. So,
Yeah, it would be certainly one very good use of any funds that are generated from tree maintenance or tree activities in the city, the tree fund.
Yeah.
Would be making it possible for that everybody would be able to have that kind of a survey of their trees if they needed it.
You know, related feedback I heard when I was on the planning commission was people with bigger lots, you know, that had a lot of trees and
Mm.
were just looking for some help in,
Yeah.
because they felt like they're carrying more of the burden of the community forest and all the benefits of it. But they also, it's at the expense of keeping it up. So I don't know what the answer is, but
The other issue is if somebody does have a sick tree, I mean, that's maybe $3, $5, $10,000 to get it down. Fixed
Sure.
income thing, that's a lot of money to have fixed income.
Yeah.
Sure.
And if you, I mean, it's one thing, you gotta survey and see if your trees are sick, but if your trees are sick, can you afford to do anything about it?
Yeah.
That's a much larger chunk of money to take care of a sick tree than just simply
absolutely.
go out and see them. You know, not hire an arborist to go, you know, look at them.
Yeah.
Right? So if we could figure out a way to do that for,
And some of these things we're concerned about, my understanding is that talking to Drew, that they're not something you can just eyeball and say there's a problem there. Some, I guess some are, but there are other serious problems with trees that you don't just know, it's not a visual inspection. It's a core sample or it's a root.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, can we, I'd like to hold and come back to this discussion when we talk about exceptional trees in a few minutes, if that's okay. Is there anything else by way of reporting on the Arbor Day, on the Green Fair? I mean, did we learn anything?
Is this your first one?
No.
We do it every year. This was a couple new things this year. Had you been to one before?
I had not.
So Victoria did an excellent job, not only preparing the table, making the poster, the new banner that we had out, but also she was really good just engaging with people. So, you know, I think
Sure
that
you
helped
didn't
make
do
it.
this last year?
I was in Toronto last year for it. Yeah.
Okay.
But I've done it for several years and, you know, I thought we had good brochures to hand out this year. We had the Arbor Day event coming up that generated a lot of interest. So
Yeah,
I
it was
thought-
really
I
nice to
thought it was
have
a
the event
particularly
hand
good
out.
one this year.
Hopefully we get some attendance at the Arbor Day event, because there were a lot of people who took the
We
flyer.
handed out quite a lot of those flyers.
I thought the little bowl of chocolates was.
That was in addition to Victoria again.
Yes, okay, well,
That was
Was that
Mark.
John? Or I mean,
That was all Mark.
That was Mark. Okay, sorry.
yeah,
well done, all you folks for attending and giving your time. Appreciate it on behalf of the tree board.
thank you for that. Thanks again, my thanks too for everybody too for that. It was really great to have Drew there for as much time as she
Yeah.
was able to put in there. Being less than a full-time employee, it was to have her there. She was generous with her time and she can answer questions that I certainly can't and.
Yeah, a number of folks with more technical questions about either the trees on their property or about replanting or about permitting that she was able to answer. And she gave out her card to a number of people. I still have a stack of her cards
Yeah.
that are in with the tabling supplies. And if she is willing, that may be something we want to make sure we keep with all the tabling supplies, is a stack of her cards to give out.
Yeah.
Depending on how many emails she wants.
All right, well, good. Let's turn to the related event, the Arbor Day. We have initiated this Arbor Day activity event in the city for April the 27th. From about approximately 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in Horizon View Park. What started out as a simple idea that we had to do a tree walk around the Horizon View Park that I think was going to will lead, but other groups thought it would be good if they could join us up there, since maybe there'd be some people coming together. So then we have the Secret Garden Tour people are going to use they showed at the Green Fair also, they showed a small
Little model.
model of the
Oh.
sculpture that they intend to have installed in Horizon View. So they want to present that again to the public and talk about the process that they go through to help provide community art for the city of Lake Forest Park. So they're gonna do that, and then the Parks Advisory Board would like to join us. And they'd like to give an update on this. It sounds like they're thinking they would just like to do an update on the planning that's going on for the Lakeside Park, the Lakefront Park. So we got kind of those three elements going on in the agenda there. And I think we just would do the tree walk last. So we got some planning to do.
At 1 PM on the 27th.
This month.
Yes.
Now, I think,
April
did we raise
27th.
this question last time? And how many people we got who were interested in or able to help out with that?
Is it Saturday?
It's a Sunday.
It's a Sunday
I can help
afternoon,
with
1
it.
o'clock. Let me get a note of that. We got.
I've got my responsibility.
You gotta be there, yeah.
I'll be there, so.
Victoria, you're up for this again?
Yeah, I'm happy to be
Great.
there and help. I have all the tabling supplies in my car still. I'm happy to just, if you want them back for 2 weeks, I can pick them back up from you, or I can just hold on to them. Okay, I'll just hold on to them for now.
Is there a canopy that we have access to in case the weather forecast isn't good? If we're gonna set up.
I
a
think
table.
the city, I'm sure the city does. In fact, I talked to Corey about that. So I can get that canopy, and maybe some of us who are there can meet at 12:30 and get that up.
The forecast is good, we don't need it, although maybe it's good to put it up anyways, just to attract attention to.
If the
something going on.
forecast is
Yeah.
good, then yeah, that's right.
Make it obvious where whatever happens is gonna happen.
This is from 1 to 4?
1 to 3,
1
probably.
to 3, okay.
So maybe so we can coordinate this offline too, but maybe a couple of us can get together at 12:30, and maybe I can get somebody from Corey to help with that to. Be sure we get this, if we need it, the canopy up. And I have a table that I can bring, so we got it's a regular 6-foot table.
I've got a folding table I'll throw in my car as well, just at the backup in case we need.
What do we need a table for?
If we're gonna set up a little display like we have at the Green Fair,
We want to do something like that?
I think that would be good, that way we can.
Unless
have
it's super
brochures
windy, but
Okay, so with some of the
and Have
brochures.
the banner. You,
If you can put my name down too, and Doug, did you raise your hand? Yes.
May I?
Yeah, we may want to have some time before anything starts, for people just look at the brochures and stuff like that, so. Maybe. The ADJOURN won't start exactly. Does somebody want to start a program at 1 o'clock? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that would be the idea. That would be we would introduce the event, and we'd introduce the art, the arts people to start off. Okay, so
It would be pretty much solid going on. Something's happening solidly from 1 o'clock
I think so.
till the last
Yes.
tree is buried.
yeah, and then when the tree walk starts, whenever that's scheduled for 1:45, but it'll be whenever the other things are done.
Yeah, that
No.
won't take much time.
Whoever wants to go with me, we'll walk around.
Yeah.
then
One of
couple
the
of us
things
can stay
I've
back.
seen,
strike everything.
one of the things I've seen is to go out ahead of time at any point and go and take a small branch from each of the trees that we're gonna go on the tree walk with and put that little hand-sized branch on the table. So that when people come up and go before or after the tree walk, they can really examine each branch from each tree.
To do something like
Or
that.
even with a person who doesn't have time to go on the tree walk, they can look at these little branches and say, oh, that's the tree I have in my yard, la-di-da, now I know.
That's good for the trees that are in the park, but part of the tree walking is pointing out trees that are on private property too, so.
Oh.
Now we can't be cutting their branches, but
Oh, well,
we could get a few, we wouldn't have to have all, right? And
okay,
get some from some of the trees that are in the park would be fun to do, I think.
okay. Just for the sake of learning, it's like, I remember, you look at a tree and you think, okay, whatever, and then you see the actual little branch, and it helps that
Right.
much better.
And what does the cone look like for that tree?
It was something like that, yeah.
Something like that. Well, that's an idea. There's a sound system that Corey has that's apparently not too. It's fairly manageable size. I think I will come by City Hall and see that and probably use it, at least. She thinks it's mobile.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it'd be nice to have there for when we're talking at the canopy, at the awning, but I'm not sure we're gonna.
I don't wanna carry something like that
Yeah,
around,
I know.
I mean, I've done enough field trips, my voice carries well enough that I can communicate.
I've done tours sometimes in the past where you get 30 of these headphones and you walk around. I don't think we need it.
Really needed for the main presentation of the parks presentation.
Yeah,
That would be
yeah, so I think it would be good to have it
For
in
that,
case
and
we
not,
needed for
not,
that.
not mobile though.
And I will follow up on making that available. We got to put what about refreshments? Want to do anything by way of refreshments?
They're always good.
Talk to Polly, you can talk to Polly about how you arrange those, you be in charge of refreshments? Sure. That'd be excellent.
Let's make it a potluck.
The problem is you never know how many people are gonna.
Right.
We've done Arbor Day events where 5 people showed up. And we've done other events.
That'll be part of the marketing, maybe the first 10 people get a refreshment.
Well, Richard, if you're able to do that, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll do
I don't know if we-
something.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be
Coffee, or
elaborate.
if it'd be just a cooler with some kind of juice in it, some paper cups go along with it.
Yeah, something like that.
You do this every month for.
My wife does, yeah.
Yeah, well, she'll have like
For what?
A 5 acre wood.
Oh,
the work parties at 5 Acre Woods. First Saturday, which this time, many of us will be not able to attend. Why is that?
Saturday.
Oh, it's a big national day of
big protest
resistance,
this Saturday.
protest.
Oh.
Going on. I know I'll be tied up with that, so.
Dick, how many pages are the PDF updated tree walks that are on the website approximately? Do we want a handful of
Not-
printed copies of the 2 that are finished and on the website?
We could,
I know the tree walk books were
Yeah.
very popular.
yeah.
And especially if folks either aren't able to stick around with us or when we
Yeah.
do the other walk and are more comfortable with the printed copy. Just
I
that
don't know how
handful.
hard it is to set up a QR code.
I already have a note on here that I'm going to
Because-
do a flyer with a QR code that directs you to the tree walks on the website.
Because my whole goal in that was to get it so that people can download it to their phone and then they have that as they walk around.
Yeah,
Rather than have a paper copy, so that, you can set that up that way.
I will have at least one copy that I'll do. I'm gonna buy some little acrylic stamps so that we can prop up flyers with information. I'll have a little QR code on there.
Yeah, so if you wanted to print them off the city website, we can download the website. You have a color print, that would be good.
I'm gonna have a
Or have-
list that do that for me.
Elizabeth do it, yeah, since they are color photos of the trees now.
Yeah.
So the tree walk you're gonna do for Arbor Day is not any of the tree walks.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is.
It's the
It is.
Horizon View tree
Oh,
walk.
okay.
We probably won't do the whole tree walk, but we'll do the part that goes around the park and the reservoir and back to the park.
I'll shoot you an email, Elizabeth, but I'm thinking just like 10 copies of each that can go in with the tabling supplies, and until we get rid of them, we can put them out at our tabling events for folks who prefer a paper copy. I know some folks aren't as comfortable, especially walking around and looking at their phone and navigating on it, so.
Okay, okay, good. The other thing I think we need to do is a shoreline area news article. And take advantage again, I think, of the city. The city did put some information in the quarterly newsletter. And but we can do more, I think, by way of using the city as the. Is anybody who's dying to do a shoreline area news article?
If you want, that's
That's a lot of stuff.
The shoreline area news already had an announcement about this, I think.
Did they? I
I think
don't.
I saw it a few days ago. I mean, I don't look at it every day, but I.
Sometimes they pick up other stuff from other places,
Yeah.
but
Maybe
Okay,
there-
'cause I think
maybe
they
there's
had
a
that
way
little-
we can double check it and, how you can comment, and sometimes that might bring the article up to the forefront or something.
yeah, just if it happened recently, you could just scan it or send Diane a note. She recalls it being, you want to take that on?
Yeah, I can do that.
That would be wonderful. You saw the nice flyer that we have, which has almost all the information you need in it. To begin with, but well, I'll be sure to copy that.
Okay.
I know
Thank you.
one person at the Green Fair, I believe from Stewardship Foundation, mentioned that they would have liked to have been
Oh, yeah.
part of it or have information. Do we want to invite, not as like a large formal presentation, but see if anyone from Stewardship Foundation wants to say a few words, or the CAC wants to say a few words?
Well,
The Climate Action Committee,
oh,
see if anybody else wants a few minutes of microphone
You know, I
time,
talked to-
or do we want to call it good?
I want to call it good, but I'd be open,
Yeah,
people want to do more with it, it's.
I've been to too many meetings that were started out by, president of the university spoke, then the chairman of the department spoke, and then X spoke, and then Y spoke. And everybody has their 3 minutes and you get really sick and tired by the fourth.
I did talk to Kim, the president of the Stewardship Foundation, about that and explained to her how this thing had evolved.
Yeah.
She was happy with that.
Just thinking if they wanted to nod along, but if they wanted to say anything.
It would be great if they could put it in their newsletter though, because that gets pretty wide distribution, I would think.
Yes, indeed.
Or put it on their events calendar. I can follow that. I don't care if you like.
Are you okay? You know that?
Yeah.
I don't have anything else for you to take on, Richard, but that would be great. That'd be good if you were to do that. Okay, wonderful. I'll follow up with the city, see if how we can just. News flash or whatever the vehicle is these days. Last thing on this, would anybody be interested in doing a quick site visit? I mean, this is like our show, like we gotta figure out where to put it up there and stuff like that. So I already did one little survey walking through there and got an idea, but if anybody else wanted to meet me up there sometime and just scout it out where we think would be the best place for it. Some Sunday afternoon, so. Or are you gonna trust me to choose a little?
Chatting with the folks who are going to be presenting about the new art installation, they said, I don't know if you've talked to them about the location, I believe it's gonna be over by the playground. So possibly
Yes.
trying to do it somewhere
Yes.
near-ish to where they're going to be doing it, so that they can say like,
And
right
that's-
over there, instead of like, oh,
That
That way
is an open
somewhere.
area that I thought too would, I think I know.
Not
where it-
too far from
just to the north.
parking lot.
yeah,
Right.
be
Yeah.
a nice place to set up.
Okay,
Flat enough that we can set up a table.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll trust you.
okay, that's good. We'll see how that goes. Okay, anything else we need to think about in terms of the Arbor Day? I'm really excited about this. I think it's gonna be a great thing.
I'm just wondering if there's any more marketing. Given that we want to get more people there,
Mhm.
are there any other channels or ways we can get the word out? We've got the city, we've got Berlin Area News, we've got Stewardship Foundation.
What about the garden club?
Yeah. Be a good one.
Anybody could do that, my wife, she's Sarah's now, okay, I can help her. Yeah, good.
One quick question. Dick, do you know what trees you'd be able to get samples of?
I could go up, an hour and ahead of time and with a pair of clippers and get a few things.
Well, what I'm thinking of is if you know now, before the thing, we could have, you were talking about pulling out clips from the tree. If there's something in the tree walk spot, western hemlock, position this, if you know you're gonna have a western hemlock, and you could print that out, that page out, and have western hemlock and a little thing to talk about western hemlock.
Yeah, the tree walk don't have much about the biology or natural history of the trees that you see.
Okay, so it's not really much,
So-
but not much to print off.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Look at the tree walk sometime.
Okay, another simple thing we could do, but we have publicity is put up that flyer a few places around the city. Like
Yeah.
the kiosks at Third Place Commons.
We have it posted in third place comments already.
Oh, we do,
We took one from the table and just posted it at the end of the event, I think.
nice.
Dick, did you put one over on the bulletin board? At the
Yes,
end? Okay, so it's posted up there.
the quote for is so crowded though.
I know.
Yeah, it is.
What about just like signs, like political signage, that strategic places kind of point out like. This triangle here on the way up to. Horizon View, that could be reusable every year, and say. Arbor, really Arbor Day, Horizon View.
Well, that's an idea. That's an idea. It's a little more involved and some other things, but
We have signs at Grace Cole, that say keep off the path and
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
restoration, things like that, I'm sure. it could be.
It's a different time, date, location every year, so figuring out how we could do reusable signs, I would wanna put a little. Figure out, I think there's a way to do it, I just don't
You
know.
always hold it at Horizon View.
No. No, well, we can't guarantee that.
Yeah.
But, well, you could make a basic bare bone sign, and then you could
Yeah.
modify it year by year. I guess, or something like that.
Is this event gonna be posted on a city and or any other Facebook page?
Could be. Does the city have a Facebook?
Yeah, they do, they post things on it.
Okay,
I think it's been posted on some.
it has been already in the past. Is it, could we do it again now that we're getting a little closer to the actual date? Can you handle that, Elizabeth?
Yeah,
Just, I think you probably have, if you need information, but I think you probably have everything.
I think it would be good to do it just a few days before the event, right? So that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll keep
Before-
an eye the week before, if you happen to know when it's gonna get posted, if you give me a heads up, I'll repost into the like LFP community and families and LFP moms and women group.
I'm like the worst person in the world to have on your Facebook as a follower, you know? Anyway, okay, that's something else.
I would put it on 4 or 5 Facebook pages if I knew if it's gonna be posted on Facebook, I would spread it far and wide.
Sounds like it's already on the city page and will potentially be reposted again, so.
You-
No, I mean, just personal friends and or other groups that I'm in.
Yep,
That
so you can
people would-
repost, yeah, from the city
People would
page.
come from, a fair distance if they knew there was gonna be a tree walk.
Well, you want us to do that? Can you do
Well,
that?
I
Next to
have
the
to
city
know
page.
when it's posted, so,
Well,
okay, I'll just watch.
okay, well, we'll get you the information.
Okay.
We can at least send you that brochure, the copy of that brochure, that flyer that Victoria pulled together. You have contact information, Victoria, for her?
I can get it before the end of the evening.
Okay.
Well, I'm just asking that when you post it on Facebook, just when it's
Yeah.
posted, I will start sharing it, so.
I'm double checking
Okay.
whether it's already,
Oh, okay.
just a sec. Yeah, so it was posted last week, and it's supposed, it's gonna
Oh,
look
good,
like
good.
that, so
I
you can
think
go
I
on and
think
just
I've seen it then, yes, I will.
share away.
I will share away.
Great, thank you. Should we move on?
Maybe wait a week or two till it's more current.
Oh, yes, I understand that.
We
I
have
do this
3
with a lot of
likes,
events.
3 likes and 1 share already, so gaining traction.
We should move on, I think. That the next on our our list is the exceptional tree list, which I know Doug has been doing some work on recently and shared, and I see a couple of people have pressed this up.
Standard sort of measure.
So we were hoping, talking with Drew about this, we were hoping we could get, basically, there's a fair number of things we want to put before the council sometime in the near future about tree related stuff. We were kind of hoping we could actually put this one to bed, and so that the tree board doesn't have to keep coming back to it. If we can't agree on it, then we can go back to another time, but we could finish this off, then we could talk about some of the other things that we need to change next time. So the basic underlying thing here is that it says in a lot of different places in municipal code that exceptional trees are especially important and deserve special protection. The problem is exceptional is a very vague term and doesn't have any well-defined meaning. So what we looked at was saying, well, maybe let's try to protect about 2% of the trees. And then figure out, which trees are the most important ones to protect, not just the largest 2%, but sort of end up with a total of protecting 2% of the trees. And so the trees we thought deserve special, all the trees that deserve protection are on here, but that's basically all the trees in the city. Because we got everything else category. These are in alphabetical order, which is not necessarily the most logical order to think of them, but it's the way they are currently in the code, and I guess it will stay the same way. So the current code says that, does anybody have any general comments before I go to individual species?
This was just a thought, Doug, but you're talking about, and I don't know how important it is to like position this, but the 2% of the trees, but the impact of those 2% is much higher, right? Of those.
Yes, oh yeah, yeah, and I don't know if. I'm not sure if she's planning to put, I mean, Drew's gonna be the one who ends up putting together what actually goes to the council. I'm not sure if she's planning to put up some justification for that or what. We have all sorts of stuff saying, a 36-inch tree contains, 60 times as much carbon as a 6-inch tree and stuff like that. That stuff is everywhere. And she has a lot, and she has been talking about doing it. I don't know if we need to additionally justify, the importance of exceptional trees in this particular exercise. And I'm basically counting on the lawyers to tell us if we need to continue to justify that, or if we simply say that, Lake Forest Park is on record in wanting to protect exceptional trees. These are the trees that we consider exceptional.
Gotcha.
But what we've done here basically is, these are the trees we consider exceptional, and as I say, Drew had some stuff she presented a couple of meetings ago, showing, illustrating, and you had that thing you put together, I think, where you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looking at two types of trees.
Yeah, and it's very straightforward to explain why big trees are more important than little trees.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to for this. We do.
Yeah,
There's
so
certainly plenty of ways to do it.
I'll leave it to you folks.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, if anybody knows.
My take was-
Larry, if you know.
My take was I wanted to read like, 2% of the trees in Lake Forest Park, this represents, 15% of, the benefit of, yeah. But it sounds like you guys are.
Yeah, I'm not sure that would be an easy number to put out, though. The benefits, but
One general thing, there's some words that are all, in all caps here, which I don't think should be on the big league maple. Douglas fir.
okay. That almost, I'm sure that's taken out of the current code, but.
Yeah, well, I would say just, they should be
Okay.
lowercase.
Yeah.
As common names.
Well, why don't you go ahead, Doug? You want to talk about the specifics of these?
Yeah, I can just go down basically and read what's here.
We started to talk a few minutes ago about large trees and my conversation. I'd like to come back to that before we leave this conversation just for a minute.
Okay, so the first tree on the list here is big leaf maple. We think it's an especially important tree to protect because it's, first of all, the only large native angiosperm broadleaf tree. Yeah, really in the city. And it's certainly the only one that's of any level of commentless. So we wanted to give it a little more protection than just 2%. So we're proposing 30 inches as the diameter limit. That protects about 3% of them. The next tree, and far and away the most common one in the large tree population, is Douglas fir. This is partly Dixbury. It's a keystone species in the northwestern forest. It's the backbone of native forest. It's basically what all of our forests are built around. It also plays an important role in salmon. So we thought that we again needed to protect a little more than 2% of those. And so we're proposing a diameter limit of 40 inches, which would protect about 4.3%. It's actually a very small change from the current limit of 42%, right? 42 inches. We're not proposing to change fir or madrona. There are no trees any significant size of either of those in the city, so no reason to change the numbers we've got for them.
Madrona is already on the list.
Madrona is already on, so
At that level, okay.
I think it's grand fir. We're going to change it to just any fir. But generally, there's no firs in the city, or there's one fir in the city, and it's small, and there's no madronas in the survey. Yeah, in the survey.
Okay.
Western hemlock. What again is one of the big three trees that are common. It's not. No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It's not. It's not one of the most common trees in the city. Western hemlock is not rare, but it's much less common than red cedar, big leaf maple, and Doug fir. But it's a state tree. It has a lot of ecological values. We don't have enough data to really say what would cut off 30 would protect 2 or 5% of them. There's only half a dozen trees in the data set. But the biggest one in the data set is 22 inches. So based on that, a 30-inch tree is a pretty impressive Western hemlock for this city.
Okay.
Western red cedar, against the keystone species, is probably the one the Native Americans use most, as far as I know anyway. Historically important. So again, we think it needs protection, but just a little more than the 2%. So we're setting 30 inches for that. Again, about 2.8%, 3% of the trees, of the red cedars in the city. Western white pine. There are only a few western white pines in the city. They all tend to be fairly large. One of them is 33 inches, but it's one of the more important conifers in this part of the state. So we're putting in 30 inches. As again, that's a pretty good sized western white pine.
There are several of them. For part of the park, Graceville Some very large ones.
There's a few big ones.
Talking
Five
about
acre wood, too.
who's gonna measure all these?
Hmm.
I'm just kind of wondering who's going to identify these trees.
Well, these would be used if somebody was thinking about removing a particular tree.
Oh,
And so they would have the size of it and,
so it's not for a tree inventory.
no,
No, the tree inventory's already been done.
but it's based partly on the inventory.
The tree inventory looked at 600 trees out of the 300,000 in the city. And scattered random inventory, but it was done a couple of years ago. And we're basing it, based on that inventory, and we set, say, western red cedar at 30 centimeters, 30 inches. Will protect about 3% of the red cedar in the city. There were about 40 to 50 western red cedar in the city that were picked up in the 40 or 50 red cedar in the inventory. So extrapolating from those data, this is probably the number that will protect about 3%. And that's really the only true. We only really have that data for red cedar, Douglas fir, and big leaf maple. The rest of the trees are too rare to really say much about what percentage we're saving.
Okay,
So that's western white pine. Oaks, there are very few oaks in the city, certainly none anywhere near 30 inches. But it's a climate tolerance genius. It's one of the species of the future probably in this area. Has a lot of wildlife usage compared to other genera, including even non-native species. It also provides a lot of canopy coverage because of its shape. A 40-inch or 30-inch oak is going to have more canopy than a 30-inch hemlock, say. And they're slow growing, so 30 centimeters to 30 inches. Much history of 30 inches is a big oak. If we can find an oak like that, we think it really should be saved.
Okay.
And the last thing is all the other species except invasive species. We said at 40 inches, it saves about 0.5% of the everything else trees, and excluding these 6 species, you take everything else and look at them. A 40-inch limit saves about 0.5% of those. And the reason for setting a limit for them is simply that a big tree, no matter what species it is, has some values for carbon sequestration, water protection, canopy, and things like that. There are many things where the importance of the tree is connected to what species it is, like red cedar and things like that. But when you get very big, you're simply talking about this is a big tree and has a lot of biomass, and is holding onto a lot of carbon and holding onto a lot of roots, stopping a lot of water running off. Even if it isn't a native species, it's doing very useful things to the environment. We ought to protect it.
so think like Sitka spruce would come into there.
Yeah.
And maples, maple trees.
I think that
I'm surprised
where
not
we
to
would
say
find is
spruce.
things like giant sequoias.
Yeah.
Get to that size
Hmm.
at a reasonably young age.
Mhm.
Most, I can't think of too many species that are not among the other ones enumerated here. That would get that big.
There could be cottonwoods. I've certainly seen cottonwoods that big. We're not in Lake Forest Park, but I've seen them in Seattle.
Okay,
I'm surprised that spruce doesn't have its own category.
Sitka spruce?
Any kind of spruce, it's surprised.
Well, they're not native to this area, so.
Well, there's a Sitka spruce is native, but
Yeah.
there are not a lot of them in our community, in our forest. I doubt that there's a Sitka spruce anywhere in the city that's.
So we should plant some.
We should plant them. I'm happy to plant them, but the code isn't gonna specify them to be protected over a certain size
I know.
when they don't exist.
But I don't like Sitka.
There you go.
Well,
That's
because
why it's not on the
when I
list.
used to do doing field work, you're walking through the forest and moving yourself through an area, and you grab hold of a Sitka spruce, and you really know you grab a hold of a spruce tree, because it's not a nice thing to grab hold of. I'm sure if you've worked in.
you wore gloves, right?
No, you don't have to wear gloves for 99% of the trees in the forest, but for Sitka spruce, you do. Take me through near water.
I gave you the wrong title to that book too. I said silver pine or something.
Yeah,
The book that Stacy recommended at our last meeting, it's the Golden Spruce.
golden spruce.
Golden Spruce. You'd like it. Okay, so back to this, thank you. What are things you want to talk about?
No, that's
A little bit
basically,
as
if
well?
anybody has any comments, otherwise I'd like to bring it up for a vote that say we want to recommend these limits to the city council.
And just double checking, so the two that say none, oaks and everything else, right now, the current list is only the first 7. There is
I'm
no,
sorry.
right now, the current list is only the first 7. So
Right.
there is no protection under exceptional trees for a catch-all or for oaks.
There is absolutely not.
And
That's one of the things that bothers me most about the current.
Yeah.
code is, I mean, the 2 trees that showed up in the survey, there's apparently a giant deodar cedar, 46 inches in diameter. And, oh, boy, I forget what the other one is. I mean, it's a 50-inch something else.
Yeah.
You know, it's simply a tree that's simply big enough, we really ought to protect it. I don't care what species it is.
And there's nothing that we took off of here and put into the anything else category, correct? Everything
There's
that
nothing
is
in the current
currently
code
on the
we took off.
list still is called out.
We made fur as a general category.
We made fur a general
as opposed to
category.
grain fur.
Okay,
But
just making sure I'm cataloging all of the changes correctly in my brain.
yeah, there are so few furs in the city.
Okay.
And the few that are small. I mean, there probably are some somewhere, but it's just, you know, firs or mountain trees.
So what about this concern that I was raising a few minutes ago? And maybe I'm off on a strange limb here by myself. Because it's clear that the environmental benefits of trees is clear. And so I'm trying to balance that on the one hand with the apprehension that was raised with me by somebody whose opinion I trust, and frankly echoes my own feelings sometimes when the wind is howling outside and I'm saying we really should sleep downstairs tonight. And we usually never do, but that kind of concern and that kind of reality that does happen from time to time. Are we doing anything by tweaking the exceptional tree list that is in any way upsetting that kind of balance that we already have? We're not talking about big changes in so much.
Here's an impression in my mind, for which I have no data. But I would say that there's no appreciably greater risk for a 40-inch Douglas fir to blow down in a windstorm than for a 30-inch Douglas fir to go down in a windstorm. It's so much site dependent.
Yeah.
It is.
That I don't think there's a risk. I mean, one of the things I've come to understand through my interactions with the public while being on the tree board is there are a lot of people out there that are just afraid of trees. We had a couple at the booth last Saturday who were wanting to know what they could do about a big tree that's on a neighbor's property. And the woman used the word scared at least 3 or 4 times when she was talking about it. And it scared they would fall down line on their house. And I asked her, how long have you lived there? And she said they were considering moving. How long? 36 years. Has it fallen down yet? No. It's.
But for something like that, maybe
it's a
that means
tree
the odds are
that's
getting
gonna
better.
could live to be 500 years old, and it's probably no more than 100 years right now, because this area was logged 100 years ago. It's a healthy young tree. Of course, I haven't seen the actual tree, but it's probably a healthy tree in its early maturity. There's almost there is a non-zero probability of it falling down and hitting your house, but it's so close to being zero that there's no reason to be afraid of it. But people have these irrational fears of trees.
Okay, but this winter, we had storms that overexceeded. It was climate change, part of climate change. I do a UPS every December. I do a UPS driver's helper, and I go out in December for the last decade. And it was astonishing just to see how many trees had landed on houses, landed on streets, landed on over and above any other year. Each year it gets a little worse.
There was a year about 20 years ago when we
Yeah.
had a much bigger blowdown than we had this last one.
Okay,
The occasional storm will knock down a lot of trees.
Okay.
But our ordinance is not gonna have anything to do with to protect against that.
Any tree over about so big, if it falls in your house, will not do it any good. And we're not gonna say any tree over so big can be cut, because if it falls on, it might hurt somebody's house. That's the whole, from page 1 to page 97 of the city ordinance is antithetical to that.
And the reason why that storm this winter was so serious was that it was an unusual event with wind from the east.
Wrong direction.
And we don't get winds from the east with
Right.
storms much. Normal winds from the south our forest canopy is
Great,
adapted to them.
that's climate change.
So,
No, no, it's
But not
not.
so
it's not.
simply can be explained as climate
It's
change.
just,
Well, we know we can expect more intense storms,
Right.
Yeah.
whether they come from the east or the
I-
south or.
I think a critical point is the first one you raised, that is there any additional danger having more 40-inch trees instead of 42-inch trees? And like, if we can fairly confidently say that a 30-inch tree versus a 42-inch tree and what we're asking you to keep on your property, and it's not like you can right now go out and just willy-nilly cut down a 41-inch big leaf maple, like you still have to go through a permitting process. We're not. Like the change, to my understanding, is not so drastic that it's, you can cut it right up until this size. And I'm curious whether part of the response to this is thinking through not what do we do as our part of our first mandate of informing city policy, but our second mandate of community education. And I'm thinking a combination of like, how do you identify hazards that can be identified? How do you do that, and some maintenance pieces? One of the things that the person we were talking to was saying was like, well, can we just take all the branches off of this side? Can we just top it? And education around how do you keep it healthy, but then also how do you not do things that will make it unhealthy and make it come down on your house? Because all of the solutions she was coming up with to make this safer would have killed the tree and made it fall on her house.
this is one way to tree on somebody else's property. for sure,
Correct.
but I think
Correct.
Legally, they can cut the branches as they,
They
however, if it
can.
kills the trees, and they're liable for replacing the off to the
Right,
tree.
it-
Really expensive.
You could cut branches that extend over your property line.
Yeah.
But I don't think she was talking, it was that close to their property line.
They wanted to just like shear one side of the tree so that all the weight was on the far side, and if it fell, it would fall to the far side, which is like just not a great tree strategy. So how do we do more education around maintaining safe trees and all of that to
And I-
try to move the needle? And there are some people who will just still be afraid of the trees.
Yeah, I really agree. I think that's a great way to frame it. And I would just add that another thing that people don't understand is about tree tracks. And about how, a single tree standing there is just not going to be in general, to what you were saying earlier, Dick, about where the circumstance or the environment of the tree. It's like, I think people don't understand that if you have multiple trees together, they're much stronger than, a single tree, or if you thin a tract, it could expose, make a tree more likely.
You can always tell her that after 36 years, she's gonna have to have a wonderful new remodel.
That's another strategy.
Presumably she wasn't excited at the time, yeah. It occurred to me, it'd be great to have a database of trees that fall over. And maybe I was gonna ask Drew before she took off, if it's such a thing. There's that one tree on 180th that fell over the street, damaged the house across the street. On
Yeah, that was pretty
182nd,
impressive.
182nd, is it?
Yeah. What, 2 winters ago, something like that?
Yeah, I stopped by there actually this afternoon, decided I would see how big it was, and it was 34.
But it was rotten. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
It did have a problem.
Not a healthy tree.
And I don't know if that was visible from the outside at the time.
Kind of tree.
It was. It was probably a right away tree, wasn't it?
What kind of tree was it?
Douglas.
That was for. Anyway, so I do hear the points that you all are making in terms of is probably the factors that lead to tree failure and cause damage are site and are disease issues that maybe have an ivy in
I
some
agree.
cases,
I think that's a great point about data, right? Because it's one thing to say, we don't think the tree will come down, but another thing to say, this is the percentage of trees that come down on homes every year at Lake Forest Park. And it's not gonna be zero, but I think it's gonna be pretty low. It's gonna be lower than people think.
So yeah, good point there. Maybe the inventory, is there even keep track of trees and how they come down?
It'd be good to start a database like that.
Yeah.
We don't do it all.
I mean, every windstorm, we always I lose power several times. But we lose power because the tree up the shoreline on the hillside came down and wiped out everything. But, it's, that'd be nice to keep track of that.
Yeah, it'd be good if you could say, you know, without a doubt, the trees that fall down, there's no relationship. To them being the exceptional trees as we're defining them.
I wonder if there's any existing way to get that data, like, I don't know, insurance companies or.
Yeah.
Oh, probably just not in tree permits, right?
I don't think so. I think it would be any anecdotal information that arborists may have collected along the way, but.
Well, actually, I can agree with someone with what Nick's saying about people being just afraid of trees. My son looking for a new house a couple of years ago,
Yeah,
and he showed me a picture of one they started looking at that had it was in a relatively treeless area, and had a gigantic tree right in the front yard,
yeah,
about as far away from the house as I am from Diff. And I said, well, I would have an arborist look at that before I bought that house.
yeah.
And I like trees, but I still, that was very large, very close to his house, and several people said, very unprotected. And
Yeah.
the worst thing that can happen to a tree is to cut the trees around it. It's,
And the shoreline, I got involved because I was up in the park and you hear the neighbor up there, because we're right on the border shoreline. Whacking down these huge trees, you know, contacted Shoreline City and asked, do you guys have, what's your rule on this stuff? There's 24 inches, they can cut anything within 24 inches, and there's no permit, I don't know, I didn't see a permit. So, you know, Shoreline they're just whacking everything, so.
They are. I've seen it on Facebook where they have a line of trees along a road and they put a ribbon around everything that was going to be removed. And within a day, there was a Facebook post, you know, of 200 or 300 people saying, we're going to take down this row of trees along this road just because we need to widen it. No way. And there was a big protest.
I'm not hearing anything that's speaking to the data on this, on our proposal. That's calling any of that into question.
I like it, I
That
think
where
the
we are with it?
justifications all make sense, I don't have any questions on how you came to any of them, or.
And I wouldn't attach it to our discussion of this, but I do think it would be good for us to give some real thought to how we make educating. the
Double down
public
on some
about
of the.
So
Tree failures.
Doug, one of the discussions, I'm sorry, we make the
No.
raw data public, but they made.
For the recording, I don't want multiple conversations going on.
you're saying,
So a couple months ago, when we were talking about the tree list, the exceptional tree list, there was a.
the sectional tree list or the general tree list?
I think it was this one. Okay. Because we were talking about changing the diameter, right, and justifying that from a legal perspective.
Right.
And so those things have been addressed with this work.
This, I think, would be the justification that they would use to make legally supported justifications.
So this
All I
still
can
needs to
tell
go
about it.
through the lawyer before going to.
Yeah, we'll go through a lawyer,
So
No, that's a good point.
let me finish.
Go ahead, Neil.
Drew said she had looked at the data for several other cities in the near area, and this was better than most of them had for supporting their things. Drew's not a lawyer either, of course.
Yeah.
But Drew is a professional artist.
Yeah.
So she knows what, so that's the best I can tell you. We'll go through a real lawyer.
Yeah.
It does, however, sound kind of like rule of thumb to me, like, and I think it's, you know, it sounds reasonable to say we think we ought to preserve 2%, the largest 2% of trees in the city. But that still kind of comes back to, yeah, my idea, 2%, maybe it should be 1.5, maybe.
Yeah, but, you know, And the city council said exceptional, they didn't say 2%, they said exceptional, they left us to decide what constitutes exception.
Yeah.
We decided, you know, that 2% was a reasonable goal.
Well, yeah, I think we have, or you and Drew have, and we're kind of agreeing with that.
Right.
So, but I come back to the idea of the tree benefits. And that big trees offer more benefits, and the public is being deprived of those benefits if we're not, you know, doing what we can to preserve as many of those large trees as we can. That's as close as I get to what I think would make sense to the lawyers, but you know, you do have to run that test.
Yeah, I don't not know how we would get information about that. I mean, we can do it for, like you did.
Oh, well,
For
through the
individual trees.
I think it's a given, isn't it? I think it's a fact.
I think it is, right?
Yeah. And
I was more thinking like if we were way out of whack with any of the other municipalities, but it sounds like Drew did that.
No, I looked at the other municipalities once. There's actually a handbook that shows all of them, the publication of 50, 60 pages. There are so many different sets of rules. I mean, Mercer Island protects everything. I think Mercer Island protects everything over 55 inches. Pretty safe, something over that. That part of the city.
Yeah.
And but many cities have, so we have 3 levels of protection. We have what do we call them? Real trees. There's some that
Significant trees.
significant trees, anything over 8 inches, landmark trees, anything over 24 inches, and exceptional trees, which is what we're defining here. Significant trees,
6 inches, not 3 inches. You meant to say 6 inches. Yeah.
all right, I thought it was, it doesn't matter, there's some small limit there. If you cut a tree like that, you need to explain why you're doing it, you need to replace it, you need to give the city $125, I think it is. Landmark tree, you need a little more explanation of why you're doing it, why you can't do something else. Exceptional tree, you're not supposed to cut it, you need to provide you probably have to go before a hearing examiner and prove that, not being able to cut this tree removes your constitutional right to do what you want to be able to do with your property.
Yeah.
So it has the highest, sorry,
Hurts the property value or.
hurts the property value, or, as a property owner, I should be able to do certain things with it, just, protecting this tree says I can't, keeps me from doing it. It's a constitutional opinion.
Yeah.
So that's a
Can you say
constitutional.
the dimensions again? 6
What?
landmark,
Your significant tree at 6 inches or above,
yeah,
your landmark at 24, is it? Or above?
I believe that's right, yeah.
And then, then the
And
exceptional by type, like, it's kind of a list,
then this is.
yeah.
And you need a permit to remove anything, 6 inches or larger.
Right, yeah, anything less than 6 inches is a freebie. And any invasive tree, any of the half dozen trees that are classified as invasive are freebies. And any dead trees.
Well, like I said, I'm not hearing any objections to the information that Doug and Drew and the rest of us have all pulled together.
One question, I just wanted to run by Councilmember Goldman, is there anything in this current draft that you see as being a red flag, or is something that council is likely to push back on or have specific questions on at this point?
Well, first, in a literal sense, I don't actually have a copy of the paper, so I've just been listening to what you've been describing. It all seems reasonable. I don't think there will be enormous pushback from the council. I think, as long as the tree board explains, why are you including oaks, for example. So as long as the accompanying memo kind of lays out that, then I think it seems reasonable.
Thank you, just wanted to double check that there wasn't anything that had raised a warning for you, thank you.
He's really exceptional, Councilman.
Did you hear that, Larry?
No, we didn't.
I think we should go ahead and move on this, if anybody, unless there are other reasons why we should hold off, at least this would be our recommendation that if we approve this to take forward. I think we've kind of touched on some other things that we think make sense in conjunction with this kind of thing, education we've talked about, but.
Do we approve this as a group thing?
Still
Well,
moved,
Does anybody want to move that we approve this?
I'll move it.
Good,
I'll second.
all right, it's been moved, it's been seconded. Is there any other discussion of this?
Thanks for all the work. It's good.
Thank you.
Yeah, really, it's been a long process.
And the crowning achievement of what I was done on the tree board.
Well,
Significant.
there've been other things. So I'd say, is there all who are in favor of approving this list is
Oh,
done?
sorry,
please.
that you were adjourning the meeting.
Say aye or raise your hand or indicate. Are there any
Aye.
objections? Perfect, thank you. So now we have approved this. Now we have the process of packaging it along with other recommendations that we want to put together that we could take to the council. And I think Drew has some thoughts on that. We do too. We've been doing Doug and some other things, not nearly as major as this, I don't think. Okay, very good. Thank you all. The next on our agenda is Community Forest Management Plan. I'm going to suggest that we skip right to the Holly invasive essay and maybe finish up with whatever time we have on the management plan. I looked at that and I was curious what it was, and then Elizabeth reminded me it did come up in our conversation last.
Mark, so can I just make one suggestion?
Or yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So you're not going to be discussing them tonight, but would it be helpful to at least list the other parts of the tree code that you're going to be taking up next month just so that the tree board members can start to brainstorm about it.
That'd be fine with me,
I can
if
give
we can
you,
do that in a fairly succinct manner.
I can give you a couple of examples, but I can't give you all of them. One of them, for example, is that the tree code is currently in the books, refers to the tree that says you have to pick replacement trees from the general tree list as of July 31st, 2024. There's no reason to put that. That means we can't change the general tree list. So we just want to amend that part of the tree code to say the tree list as amended. There is a thing that says that you have to pick for street side trees, you have to pick that from the trees that are under 30 feet tall. Well, that's not necessarily a good idea someplace you might want a larger tree. There really a lot of housekeeping type of things like that. There are some other issues, I think. I think Drew wants to, I don't want to jump ahead on too much, wants to make it clear what a person's options are if they really have a tree they really want to cut down. And they can't find a way to avoid cutting it down. But I'd let her figure out what she wants to do there. But most of the other ones, as far as I'm concerned, are just really housekeeping. You know, it doesn't make sense to refer to an unchanging tree list. I mean, it would actually mean, for example, all the changes. Oh, well, they have the tree list change too. The general tree list changes have to be included, but we've already voted on those. So we as a tree board have already voted on those.
The general tree list.
The general tree list, yes. We have too many tree lists going on at once. Most of them I don't think are controversial, but we can certainly for the next meeting put out to the tree board all the things that are being changed, and that would be fine. Yeah, that'll be up to you mostly to do that.
And I think she's out for 2 weeks, so she's out for, I think, 2 weeks, so
Yes,
maybe at the next meeting, if she has
maybe.
time before then. I don't know when she's actually back in office.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can do that summary of the tree code for which she's willing to do for the realtors discussion that we want to have.
Yep.
Is that okay, Larry, with that, just kind of that kind of brief summary at this point?
Yeah, I'd like to just flag one more. For the right-of-way replanting, the top tier is in the right-of-way. Second tier is tree deficient zones. Third tier is paying a fee. And so do you want to add a middle tier between 2 and 3, which is just generally in the city, before you jump to pay a fee? So I think that's worth having a discussion about.
Yeah, I thought we did. I would have sworn we did that, but I would have been wrong.
You might have when you were making the recommendations, and then it ended up getting taken out of the ordinance. So
Yeah.
if it's something you feel is important, then just having that discussion again.
Yeah, no, but I don't think there'll be any disagreement with that a tree planted in the city is better than money in the tree fund, or it's preferable money in the tree fund.
So your thought is that we might want to revisit that whole topic of alternate planting scenarios.
I think just asking, should there be a catch-all plant, is it better to plant it anywhere or put money in the tree fund? And so what would the priority be? But again, I don't want to hijack the meeting tonight, just something to think about, is that a preference or not?
I can certainly bring it up with Drew, but I was certainly not aware that got lost, because I would have bet any amount of money that when the last time the tree board looked at it, we said, no, there should be 4 levels. And one of them got left out. Nobody asked me about it. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so we got a list of things we want to talk with you about. We finalize that list. You have any sense, Larry, is it ideal time to bring this to the council, or? I'm not urgency on it, but that probably before budgeting starts up again.
I suspect, the earliest would be July. The big thing coming from the Planning Commission is middle housing. And after middle housing is going to come the updated the climate chapter of the comp plan. Those have earlier debt, like the middle housing has to be by the end of June. So I think those are going to be the 2 big things the council's working on. And then after that, in summer, that would free up, there would be an opening for tree code.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion on that at this point? I do think we should move on to the holly tree invasive essay. And Dick, you got ideas about that?
Yeah, so at the last meeting, I noted that with imminently, the city was going to take up the issue, or the state was gonna take up whether holly should be declared an invasive noxious weed on the state list. And they did, on March 11th at their meeting, they agreed that holly should be a Class C noxious weed. So I had mentioned, I think before, that I had started writing an essay about holly as a noxious weed and something to post in our, maybe publish in e-news, as we have published things on an irregular basis in the past about this. And I had sort of set it aside because I wanted to wait and hear what the tree board, or what the noxious weed control board decision was. And I haven't got back to it, but I will try to get to that and finish that up shortly. It's timely, I think, now that it's considered a noxious weed.
And what kind of, like, what content are you looking at?
I was gonna write a little bit about the natural history of holly and how it has spread. There was some very nice research done by a guy, UW Bothell, at using St. Edward State Park as his study site. And where he got some actual quantitative measurements about how fast holly is spreading. In that as a representative woodland. And it was phenomenal. It's like 5% area a year or something like that spread. Which is faster than just about any other woodland weed that we have, I think. So I was gonna, go into a little bit of the background of that. Note that it is now a noxious weed, and then say something about what homeowners could do to remove it. The state's decision is a little watered down because there was a very strong lobby from the commercial holly growers to prevent it being listed as a noxious weed. So there are exceptions. Commercial growers can continue to grow it. Homeowners can, like most weeds, homeowners are not required to control it. There's only, I think, one category of noxious weeds that are so extreme that the homeowners are required to remove it if it's found on their property. This is not in that category, but just right to try to make some pitch that people should start removing it.
It's not a tree, is it? Is it considered a tree?
It's what?
It's not considered a tree, is it, holly?
Well, certainly
I think
it is. I mean, it can be tree form. I've seen them 30-40 feet tall. So
I think you need a permit, like Forest Park, to remove that.
if it's an invasive, if it's now considered an invasive species,
Yeah.
not just species in the state. I don't think you'd need a permit. They're rarely more than 6 inches anyways. Even a big one might reach that size.
8 or
but-
10,
we talked to somebody on Saturday who said they had one that was 18 inches on their property, which I thought might have been an exaggeration, but that would be a huge
Yeah.
one. And I think I've seen a few around that would be over 6 inches.
I guess the question would be, should we, I actually don't want to go back to, it, but should we add it to the list of no trees?
Oh, if it isn't already,
So I don't think it's, because I don't think it's a tree. I don't think we considered it a tree.
oh,
And it wasn't on the noxious tree list when we did our reservations last year. But I don't
think
really
it
want
should
to
be.
pick up that, well, yeah.
It should be if it's not,
Yeah.
but I do think it requires a permit, and there may be some other ordinance kind
I'll
of.
check it, I'll
around
check with
that.
Drew on that.
Yeah. I think she would.
Should be able to
streamline
streamline
it.
It is,
Awareness of-
it is also, I think, on the state
Oh, yes.
noxious weed control board.
So
Or Prunus lorstracis, well, I call it laurel cherry. Often people call it cherry laurel, but they get their adjective and their noun mixed up when they do that.
I'm not sure if that's on our no
What's that?
list or not.
Bay laurel?
No, that's something totally different. That's the California Bay. That's not a weed.
I'm not sure if what you mentioned is on our no list or not. Pretty much the ones with the no list are ones that are formally recognized as bad people.
Yeah.
Bad things.
in your article if you want any social history. I know the book Street Trees of Seattle has an interesting history of why holly is so prevalent in Seattle and the movement that was
Seward Park.
spearheaded to try to make it our state tree and all kinds of things. And like huge events to intentionally go out and plant it. Some interesting, I don't know if the book has sources cited for it, but
I
an
can't write too
interesting-
much, you know, the E-News
Yeah.
likes to keep things down to like 250 words in a picture,
yeah.
That's right,
so,
that's right.
I have a copy of it, and I'll see if we get some references.
Yeah.
Is that-
so I-
Arthur B. Jacobson's book, or is this a different book?
No, it's, I believe, fairly new.
Oh, I've seen
I
that.
brought a copy in
Yeah.
a few meetings ago.
Yeah.
Larry, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to answer a question about tree permits. So there's major tree permits and minor tree permits, depending on how many trees, diameters, etc. If it's an invasive, it's automatically a minor permit, regardless of size and quantity.
But you
So there
have
still needs
have-
to be a permit, but it's the minor permit.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other discussion on that topic? I look forward to seeing this article. You want to share it with anybody here before you send it to the publisher?
Yeah, definitely, yeah,
That'd be good.
yeah, I'll pass it around, get comments.
I think if you're happy with it, and if you share it with somebody and they're happy with it, I think you should go ahead, so it doesn't need to necessarily wait till a meeting. Well, there's one other topic here, and I don't know that we have the time to get into it. It's the community forest management plan. I sent out this little worksheet that I was hoping might provide some basis for thinking about this. If you have one, BJ, everybody got one in their packet. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So I think actually Stacy and I agreed to get together and bring in line for the management plan that we want to produce. So this was kind of a step towards moving up to that, was taking a look at what the main topics that Bainbridge Island has in theirs, which I don't think has been updated since 2006. This is just taken off their website. And then what Shoreline has done is 2 representatives. There's certainly some common some patterns that run through there. And I don't know if anybody gave any thought to how they would pull out of that into extrapolate from those 2 examples into what look like an outline for ours.
Give it a little thought, Mark.
Yes.
You know, they're the plan that exists right now is so old, you know, it doesn't even mention climate change.
Right.
So there's some really significant updates, I think, and also I don't think there was any data that existed, you know, for like saying, here's the baseline of where we are, and that's what we're gonna measure. It talked about measuring, but there was no baseline established. So my takeaway actually with looking at these other plans, and you had some other ones that were out there, is I think there's some good content in the current plan, but I actually think we should just start from scratch from a outline standpoint.
There's good stuff in the current plan, management plan on the benefits of trees, for example. I thought that gets pulled over pretty quickly into, because I think that would be a piece of a revised management plan for us. So you know, I think maybe if you all are amenable to this, we'll put this on the agenda for next time and maybe think about it some more. I do have a little graph of what I thought was an outline that flowed out of this, but maybe it takes a little more time to present, to think about. On the one hand, I'm kind of excited about this. On the other hand, I know what a horror, what a tough thing it can become to take on a group writing project. And so we want to try to figure out how to avoid that. And I guess on the one hand, I'm somewhat intimidated by the idea of taking it on to begin with. Just because the way municipalities work, you hire a consultant if you can to do this kind of work, somebody who's written a few of these. And we did have a chance to talk with the people from the Cascadia who are working with you and the climate policy group. And I think Drew is still holding out some hope that the grant that she was looking into may not be wiped off the board, but It's not certainly anything that can be counted on the way we were hoping that we could possibly draw on some funding there to do this. So I'm kind of torn between kind of fear and fascination with taking this project on. On the other hand, I know we have a lot of talented people in this group, and it's certainly within our capability. I would hate to see it become, you know, what we did for the next year. You know, I think there's other things we want to sure that we're able to take on. So if it's okay with you, maybe take this worksheet, do other research, think about it some more. And maybe we can put it up, be sure it gets on the agenda for our next meeting, because it's getting close to the time we want.
No, at the risk of sounding like a devil's advocate,
Yes, sir.
I'm reading through what it says, but you summarize the shorelines plan.
Mhm.
We've just been told that shoreline is allowing trees to be cut right and left,
Yeah,
right of ways.
indeed.
One needs to be sure that there's some connection between what we think is a wonderful idea and what we actually do, because it doesn't sound like the shoreline has actually achieved that. It sounds like they've, you know, these are all wonderful things to do in the tree objective, and they'd all be important things, but if you don't do them, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can have your management plan say we want to do them,
Well, that's right.
and I don't have any solution to that problem at all. It's just, it's distressing after what somebody was saying about shoreline, to read the shoreline has all the things in their management plan that we would probably want to put in our management plan.
Yeah, and I think there's actually other resources out, there's lots of other resources out there that you can look at for a community forest. Or these types of plans.
Well, somebody here mentioned the Mercer Island. They must have a wonderful plan, because it's a combination here of saying, okay, somebody wants to take down a tree because it blocks their view. And then there's other people that say, well, we want trees. I think Mercer Island would be good to look at. See if they have a plan.
There are lots of other, I don't know if Mercer Island's plan would come under my
Okay.
definition of a good plan, but I know there are good plans out there.
Yeah.
To my way of thinking. So there is a lot of ground to be looked into for ideas about this, but I do get the sense that there's gonna be a pattern, and it's not an infinite kind of
Yeah.
list of options. It is something that we can put that we can, I think, decide on pretty quickly.
Based just on the like summary titles, section titles here, one thing that strikes me is. And struck me as I was reading ours, which was from around the same time as the Bainbridge one.
Mhm.
Ours felt very like this is the current state. It felt like something that within a year and definitely 5 years was gonna be fully outdated. Because it was
Yeah.
heavily about like, where are we point in time? Just the outline of the shoreline one feels like it could be more easily written as an evergreen document that gets updates, new data added over time instead of every 5 years, feeling like we need to just completely scrap and start again with new information. So that's one of the things that's on my mind as we're thinking about what is the purpose of it? What content do we want to be thinking about? What's the like big picture outline that we're aiming for in the document? It feels to me like it would make more sense to be aiming for something that's more evergreen and updatable than something that is just, this is what we're doing in 2025.
This is the kind of document that it is a foundational document, you know, and in one sense, it would be the reason why we would want to have a code. A part of our regulations that govern trees is because we have talked as a community about the importance of our community forest.
Yep.
So I mean, to be clear, because it is that kind of document, it would go through a public process in terms of doing that. It would be, you know, presented to the public, and we take feedback from the public and probably modify it on the basis of input from the feedback. So I'm going to suggest we revisit this next time, and we give it some more thought. Take that last column if you get a chance to see how you might outline this document. So along that line, we should think about what we want on our agenda for next time, and I do want to put the community forest management plan there. What have we talked about that we got follow up on? We mentioned a couple of things that we'd like to.
We have Arbor Day follow. Arbor Day revisit.
There'll be Arbor Day. Yep.
I will try to contact the people that I have on my list for the 5 Acre Woods project.
Oh, yeah.
And if not have draft sort of plan, at least have an update on that. For the baby.
Okay, 5 acre wood plan update.
No, I mean, I don't.
Yeah,
A
whatever.
long way to
whatever
get
that
the
means.
next plan, I think, for a project.
Yeah. We said, did we not, we wanted to maybe pull together that list of additional items for council consideration.
Possibly the time after next. Well, it's
Tree ordinance.
We'll see where we are next
maybe,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, so,
For the tree ordinance, Mark, so.
yep, the tree ordinance.
And it's funny, I just got an email for the work party at 5 Acre Woods.
Was there other items come to mind? We'll think about this some more and appreciate Elizabeth's pulling that together for us. The community forest management plan, the Arbor Day recap, the tree, the 5 acre wood planning process, update on that.
Someplace along the way, someone should talk to some arborists about whether poisoning, how to deal with things, how to deal with the black locust. Because they're undoubtedly, professional arborists probably really do know how to do it. And I think, our speculation of what might work better is probably doesn't go very far compared to what a professional arborist knows.
So.
Or for a professional, somebody like from Bartlett's or somebody like that,
Well, maybe that gets folded into
Well, I'm
what
gonna
Dick was
contact
talking about.
the latest KCD, which was what
Okay, and I'm sure, I would think that Drew has got a handle on
Yeah, I
on
think
that.
it would be,
They would know.
at least tell the
There's nothing
resources
wrong.
for her to find out what she doesn't know.
Yeah, okay. But that is gonna be a big, getting rid of the black locust is probably gonna be a big element to do. So finding out how we're gonna do that, getting whatever approvals necessary,
Well,
something to start out early.
it's a known universe, so it's just a matter of figuring it out. But okay, any other thoughts come up, send them to me, please, and between Elizabeth and myself, we'll see if we get the final agenda for the next meeting. Thank you all. Yes, BJ, you're gonna come to our next
Anybody
meeting?
know about the orchard on Northeast 193rd and 35th Avenue Northeast?
I know about it. Well, I don't know about it. I've seen they're doing a lot of trimming.
Nobody knows the owner or anything about it.
Oh, I don't know the owner.
35th and.
It's a big apple orchard, old apple orchard as you're going, it's on your left as you're going north on 35th from 105, 104.
Crossroad is Northeast 193rd.
It's next to where we did the Arbor Day, or the Ivy Out.
Oh, it's right next to Blue Waffles.
Yeah.
Here.
What?
Yeah, it's.
I want to contact the owner and help them.
Oh, that's.
City Fruit wants to visit their orchard and I just thought if I come and ask anybody and everybody.
King County Parsons. Lot.
Oh, yeah, I know the name and address of a guy lives there and he's 93 years old and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, he can't
His son
possibly
was
be
a
doing
friend
it
of my
work.
Wife's and
What's that?
his son was a friend of my wife's and
Oh.
the son died.
It looks like they want to make those apple trees.
So I don't know,
produce.
I don't think they have been pruned or anything for decades.
Right.
Right now, they're doing
It's
serious
sad.
pruning on.
They are doing some now?
I've seen a tractor in
Oh, good.
the orchard and I just thought, okay, is there somebody working on it
It
or
looks
not?
like it's such a wet property.
Oh, it's not.
It's
I
pretty
wish I
solid,
looked
in summer it dries out,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but that's real estate is.
Any other business for the good of the order? Thank you all so much for tonight. Thank you for those of you, all of us, basically, we're gonna be working on the Arbor Day and we'll be, I will take it to do some coordinating amongst us between now and then to see that some of these things happen.
Kind of motion that we will adjourn.
Yes, sir. Is there a
I've
second?
lived here 10 years.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mark.
Have a good night.
Good night, Larry.
Hope you're blurry now.
I think it's pretty funny.